Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Josh, and today I'm back to answer one of the questions I got after doing my full intro video to our brand new 2023 Toyota Prius, and that is how the Prius would do as a road trip car. Because some of you out there plan to buy and use this Prius as your one and only car, and you wanted to know if it can do as well for hours on end on the open highway as it can for short trips around town. Now, you guys know I will always tell you exactly like it is. I'll give you the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. So trust me when I say that, to my great surprise, this Prius is an absolutely wonderful little road trip car, with one caveat that we'll get to at the end of this video. But let's dive in and start with the positives. We just got back from an absolutely wonderful trip up to the Texas State Fair, which is held every year in Dallas, which is about 3 hours and 200 miles from our home here in Austin. And because this was our first time ever going to the State Fair, and we didn't know what the parking situation would be, and we were going to have to valet the car at the hotel and all that kind of thing, we thought, instead of taking the GX, we've got this brand new little Prius. We love this car to pieces. Why don't we give it a shot and take it up on a quick, again, 3-hour road trip to Dallas? And so that's what we did. Over 4 days, we did 675 miles and spent about 12 hours or so in the car, driving to Dallas, driving around Dallas, and then coming back home again to Austin after that. And I have to tell you, I was really not expecting the trip to be as enjoyable as it was, because in general, by every rule of thumb about cars and how cars drive and what makes a good road trip car, this should not make a good road trip car, because it's a compact car. It is low to the ground. It's relatively narrow and small in just every dimension. And ours has the giant 19-inch wheels with the low profile tires around them. So all of that usually comes together in a car to create a kind of harsh, loud, not very confident, not very planted experience out on the road. But the Prius somehow defied all those general rules and was an absolutely wonderful, perfectly compliant, perfectly pleasant, and entirely comfortable road tripping experience. And I think a big part of that also comes from the engine that's in this car. One of my biggest complaints about the Prius has always been that I felt like you were a little bit short on power, especially at highway speeds. So you were getting kind of blown around on the road. Passing was something that you had to plan about a couple days in advance if you wanted to even attempt it. This car has none of that limitation in terms of power and highway driving, even here on our big ass Texas freeways. And even with the larger engine, we were not driving particularly gently, and we were still able to do, on average, over that entire 675 some odd mile trip, we were able to average 49 miles to the gallon. And so that trip really only used about 13 gallons of gas, which at our current prices is about $35 all in that we spent for an entire weekend of driving. That's a pretty great deal. And for comparison's sake, 650 miles in my brand new Lexus GX would cost about $140. So about $100 in savings over the course of a weekend. That's a pretty significant difference. The other thing that really surprised me after spending, again, 12 hours in this car over the course of 4 days was the Prius honestly does not feel like a compact car looking forward from the front seat. And a lot of that comes from this really swoopy windshield design that we have here. The windshield goes so far forward, and the baseline, the bottom of the windshield, is so far away from you when you're sitting in either of the front seats that you feel like you're in a much bigger car. You have a really nice sense of space in here. There's a lot of airiness around you that you don't always get even in some bigger cars. Like this car on the open road feels a lot bigger than the Tesla Model 3, and I'm very familiar with that car because we always rent one from Hertz whenever we're on vacation, and I've taken the Model 3 basically up and down the West Coast and the East Coast when we've been there. And not only does it not feel like a compact car in terms of the size and space around you, it also doesn't feel as low to the ground as it is. This is a very low car because it had to be very aerodynamic. It's only about 56 or 57 inches tall, and so your seating position is much lower than that. But I think because of the way that this dashboard is sculpted, because we have this kind of two-tier design, as well as the fact that we have this driver information pod in front of you, plus the kind of iPad or toaster style screen, when you're sitting either in the passenger seat or here in the driver's seat and you're looking out on the road, you do not feel like you are in as low a car as you are in. Doesn't change, how the car is behaving out on the road, but it does give you more confidence, I think, because you don't feel like you're sitting right on the ground the way you do in some other cars like that Model 3. So being side by side with a semi-truck, for example, on the road, even though you are in a very short, very low slung compact car, it doesn't come across that way from the driver's seat. And I think that just gives you a sense of confidence in the drive on the highway in the Prius. And the same story continues in terms of comfort and refinement out on the road. Now, you guys know my other car is a Lexus GX, and that thing is like the pinnacle of open highway and road trip comfort. So you would expect the Prius, being a lightweight economy car with a tiny 4-cylinder engine, big 19-inch wheels, to be the polar opposite of that GX. But you'd be surprised how comfortable this is. It's not the same as that Lexus GX, but this is more than acceptable and really, honestly, very, very pleasant out on the open highway. And here I think it has a lot to do with the fact that these are really good tires. The 19-inch wheels, at least here in the United States, get Michelin Primacy all-season tires. Those are good tires. They are very expensive tires, but they're really good, and they do give you a lot of grip, a lot of comfort. They seem to soak up a lot of the road imperfection on the highway. Even though they are so thin and low profile, they do a really great job of giving the car a really nice ride. And although some people have said that the 17-inch wheels with the stock Bridgestone Ecopia tires has less NVH, I didn't find that. Having driven this car for a couple days with the stock 17-inch wheels and then upgrading to the 19-inch wheels with the Michelin Primacies, these I find to give a much better ride, much better grip on the road, and these are not dedicated eco tires either. And that makes a huge difference in terms of refinement and comfort, and just, again, overall confidence on road trips out on the open highway. And then finally, the last part of the comfort and refinement story is, of course, this engine. Now, I didn't say it in my first intro video to the car when we took this car out on the highway, but having driven this Prius almost exclusively now for over a month, and I've barely driven, to be honest with you, my GX, because I love this Prius so much, I can very confidently say that I agree with AMD at the Car Care Nut and the Topher that this engine is more refined and more pleasant to drive than the A25A that is, again, in our RAV4, was in my NX, is now in the Venza, RX, and Highlander hybrids as well. And a lot of that refinement and the fact that this is more pleasant to drive comes from the fact that this engine is really well suited to lightweight, compact economy cars like the Prius, because in applications like the Prius, they don't have to work nearly as hard to move the car around. And finally, for any of you who either live in a place where you get inclement weather or plan to road trip your Prius into a location where there is or may be inclement weather, you can get all-wheel drive on every trim of the new Prius, from the base model LE, like what we have, all the way on up to that top trim limited. So not only is this a really efficient car and a really comfortable and refined car out on the road, but it can also be a very capable car out on the road as well. So if you put good winter tires on the Prius and you've got all-wheel drive, you can pretty much take this little car anywhere. Now, with all the good out of the way and all the positive out of the way, let's talk about the drawbacks and the one caveat that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Now, the first drawback here is one that should be pretty obvious to anyone shopping for this car, which is that it's a small car. And so I think it really is a great road tripper for two people, because not only are your backseat passengers going to be kind of uncomfortable sitting back there for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours on end, you're going to be pressed for space. And if you don't have anyone in the backseat, you can, of course, bring the back seats full flat to the floor, and then you've got a really open cargo area because of the lift back here as well. So you can fit a ton of stuff, and probably more than enough stuff for two people, but 3 to 4, I think that's a bit of a stretch. And then the second downside and the big caveat that I mentioned earlier with this car has to do with the stock wheels and tires. Now, this new Prius, like so many cars out there, does not come with a spare tire on any model. And on top of that, all 2023 Priuses have these really weird tire sizes. So the 19-inch wheels that we have wear 195/50 R19s, which, if you know tires and tire measurements, is a really obscure size. In fact, this is the only car in all of North America that uses this tire size, because that is a really big tire that has to fit around those big 19-inch wheels, but it's a really, really narrow tire, which again, most cars just don't use. And because it's the only car that uses these tires, you can't just pick them up at any random Goodyear or Firestone or Discount Tire. The only place I've been able to find these tires is on TireRack.com, which of course also means that you're then waiting for Tire Rack to ship the tire either to you or to an installer to have it swapped out. But it's not the kind of car that you can just take to any roadside mechanic and have them swap out the tire for something that they may have in inventory there, because I guarantee you they're not going to have this size, this really odd and obscure size, ready to go on hand. Now, Toyota dealers, I'm not sure if they will have them in stock. I would imagine that they should at least have a few, because this is their car and they should be able to fix it if they need to and replace a tire for a customer. But I'm not sure if I would want to count on that. So what I did when we bought this car, knowing that at some point we would want to road trip it, or even if we just got a flat around town that I couldn't fix, I bought a full-size fifth Michelin Primacy all-season tire. And when we road tripped this car up to Dallas, I brought it with us, because if we were to have gotten a flat, I already had the tire, so I could take it then to any roadside mechanic, have them swap the new tire onto whatever wheel had gone flat, and I would have been fine and on my way in like an hour or so. What I will probably do, and what I would recommend you do if you are going to be road tripping your 5th gen 2023 and up Prius, is do what we did. So at least buy a 5th Michelin Primacy all-season tire, so you have a full-size tire ready to go that can be swapped out. And if you want to go the extra mile, which I plan to do with this car as well, is buy a full actual 5th wheel to go with that tire as well, because what that'll allow you to do is take the whole thing, because you'll already have your tire mounted on the wheel, take it out of the trunk where I keep mine, and then on the side of the road, just hot swap them out, one for the other. And then you'll be good to go, and you don't have to do the whole 50 mile an hour with a donut spare kind of thing. And because of how narrow these tires are, because it's literally such a narrow tire, when you store it in the back of this car, it's really short when it's laid on its side. So it doesn't take up all that much cargo space in the back. And it worked perfectly. And then we could still, even with that tire in the back in the cargo area, we were still able to fit 2 carry-on suitcases alongside it and shopping on top, and still close the lift back with the tonneau cover in place. So all in all, I mean, if you can get over that one, again, pretty big caveat, if it's not a deal breaker for you, it's not a deal breaker for me, because I found a way around it. I think this is a great road trip car. And the other thing is, you know, once you get to your destination, you can real world get high 60s MPG in this car doing city driving. I mean, that's a no-brainer, and it makes the Prius, again, just such a wonderful little car, not just for city driving, but also for your road tripping adventures. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this answered all the questions and gave you all the information that you were looking for. Thank you guys so much for watching another video. As I mentioned, by the way, in my Garmin video, I have set up an email for any of you who don't want to leave a comment downstairs and want to private message me outside of YouTube. The email is going to be on screen here. I would love to hear from you guys, so shoot me an email if you want to. Thank you guys so much for watching another video. I will see you in the next one. Have a great one, and take care.